In this video, I'm going to show you very detailed how to maintain your SSG24 to keep it sealed, to keep it clean, and to keep the action smooth, and also to stop any of the steel parts from oxidizing. Now, the guide that I'm going to show you doesn't just work for the SSG24, it works for every spring-powered bolt-action sniper out there, and a lot of the steps that I'm going to show you also work for all kinds of other guns. So even if you don't own an SSG24, this video might contain some useful information for you. Now, for the substances, I'm using the Norwich maintenance kit, which includes, two kinds of silicone oil, mech oil, screw glue, rubbing alcohol, and also some tissues right here. Special tissues for cleaning barrels and which don't rip apart when you use oil on them. Okay, so this SSG has been cleaned, I think 2 weeks ago, so it's not too dirty, but I'm still gonna show you all the steps that are necessary to keep it running for a very long time. But what you should keep in mind is that don't do this process every 2 weeks. I would recommend to clean the barrel after every game or before every game, depends on what you like best. Hopper bucking exchange, maybe every 3,000 shots. And when it comes to lubing up the trigger box and the cylinder, piston, all that kind of stuff, don't overdo it, really, maybe all 5,000 shots. So at one game, let's say you shoot around 500 BBs, then that's around 10 games, which is probably 3 months, depending on how often you play. Okay, let's get into it. First of all, externals. I personally don't clean externals because I don't really see a point to it. It's just for beauty and I only care about function. So I usually don't clean it on the outside unless it gets super dirty. But what we can already do without disassembling the gun is cleaning the inner barrel, and therefore you want to turn off the hop up all the way. Then you take the cleaning rod that's included with the SSG24. You take some of these tissues right here, and then you rip them apart into a small piece like this, and then one time in the middle. Then you loop it through the cleaning rod. And before you insert it into the inner barrel, you can use some of the rubbing alcohol. Just dip it in there, maybe turn a little bit so if it's too much, that it's not too wet. And then you insert it. Again, make sure that the hop up is all the way off, otherwise you can damage the rubber. And then you just go down your inner barrel, twisting the rod and shoving it in there. You will feel a resistance once you pass the bucking. There you can also twist it. Don't overdo this. If you feel a little bit of resistance, just pull it out gently again, because otherwise you can misplace your hopper rubber, which will result in tilting shots. So do this very gently, pull it out again, twist it. And this barrel should not be too dirty. As you can see, it's a little bit dirty, not too much. You can repeat the process, but you do this until this white thing right here doesn't come out dirty anymore. So you repeat this process over and over until the tissue is completely clean. Now what's great here is now that the rubbing alcohol, it's gonna dissolve inside the barrel and it's gonna evaporate out. So it's gonna be a dry barrel, not like, when you clean it with water, you will have problems that the water stays inside the barrel, might cause oxidation. And yeah, you want a clean barrel, otherwise your gun won't shoot accurate. Okay, now let's take this SSG apart. That's, by the way, my SSG, so a Gen 1, one of the oldest SSG. The serial number 001. That's why it's pretty messed up. All the coating is gone already because it got bumped around a lot and it went through a lot of games, but it still works perfectly because I maintain it properly. Okay, remove the stock. There's nothing really we can do on the stock, so we put it to the side. And the upper is the part we're gonna focus on in this video. So we just disassemble it, we take off the mag well. When it comes to disassembling, take care that especially those small screws, when you tighten them, don't tighten them like crazy and disassemble those screws as few times as possible, because the smaller the screw is, the lighter and the easier the thread will strip, and you want to avoid this at all costs. Okay, then we unscrew the outer barrel. If you can't unscrew it, it means that your lock screw is locked down. Therefore you need this tiny Allen key right here. You insert it, just unscrew it, and then you're all set. Then we can already access the cylinder. Now, I don't recommend to take the cylinder out for cleaning. It's not necessary. And also you need to remove the trigger box, which I don't recommend because the threads can strip right here. What I recommend is, you first clean the cylinder with those tissues right here. And as you can already see, it is a dirty cylinder, even though I cleaned it some time ago. Okay, then we rack it back. We clean the cylinder. The reason why I want to clean the cylinder is because, of course, if it's clean and nice, it's going to be a smooth action. And, all this dirt won't help with the action being smooth. So it's already quite smooth, but we will get it smoother once we apply some oil to it. So again, just clean everything up. And then we take a new tissue, maybe half of it. And we're gonna apply some of the mechanic oil. This one, it's made for steel parts, to protect steel parts. Oh, here, right, the tip came off actually. If this happens, by the way, you can take out the tip with pliers or you can just use it like this. So you put some of the oil here onto this tissue. So you have it on there and then you wipe it onto the cylinder. Don't make the mistake and just, put it all over the place. That's not how it works. You want to have a very, very thin oil layer, not too much, just enough to protect it and to lube it up. And that's really all it needs. Then you pull the cylinder back to make sure you reach all the areas. And if you worry about the cylinder, not being oiled right here, yeah, that's true, it's not oiled right here, but I don't want to disassemble the gun. And the oil is gonna spread through the glide rings and don't worry, the oil is gonna spread over the entire cylinder. There we go. If you want, you can also use the mech oil for parts like the steel screws, which are here on top, on top of the rail. If you don't want those to oxidize fast, you can just put some of the mech oil onto those rail pieces. Then also the stock screws are steel screws, so you can also, put some of the oil there. Just a very thin layer. Also this one is made of steel, so a thin layer goes on there and it's not gonna oxidize as fast anymore. Okay, so much about the mech oil. If you want, you can also use it for the inside of the trigger box. Let's show this to you real quick. So we open the trigger box for this matter, because inside the trigger box are also steel sears and there's a lot of friction on those sears, so it might be a good idea to also apply some oil onto those parts. Let's open the trigger box real quick. There we go. Now we're on the inside of the trigger box. And also there, if you want to go super in depth when it comes to maintenance, you can even take out the sears and lube those up. But for now, it's not really necessary. There's plenty of lube in there. But you can still use the tissue and apply it in the gap between the trigger sear and the piston sear, because that's a part of friction. And you basically want to get it in between those two parts. So here a little bit of oil, there a little bit of oil, because when you release your shot, there's a lot of friction and you want to get that friction as low as possible. So you have a smooth and nice trigger pull and that it doesn't whir as fast. Okay, then we can assemble the trigger box back together. If you want, again, you can lube up the entire sear, to stop it from oxidizing. But usually it's quite lubed in there already when it comes out of the factory. So it's not really necessary, but you can still do it if you want to. If you see any of the screws of your SSG coming loose from the vibrations of the shots, for example, the trigger box screws or the screws on the rail, you can lock them with the included screw glue. So for example, right here, if this trigger box screw happens to be loose, not on this one actually, because I tightened it down, you can apply the screw glue onto the screw. Again, you don't need to do this if the screw is tight, but if it happens to be loose, you just remove the screw. You put some Loctite on there, on the tip, very, very gently, just a little bit onto the thread, and then you put it back into the hole and you screw it in there again. Screws that are nice to have some Loctite on are the two trigger box screws, then the screws on the rail, those 3 ones, because if the rail comes loose, of course, your scope will point in whatever direction. Then also, very typical one is the one here in the back that holds the cap in place. If this one gets loose, you will, see your bolt handle getting a little bit wobbly. So also here, take the screw out, apply some Loctite and screw it back in. Okay, now I'm gonna show you how to use the silicone oil. So let's open the cylinder head. And there is 2 different kinds of silicone oils included in the kit. There is a thin one and there's a thick one. And there's a reason for it. For moving rubber parts like the piston head, you want to use the thin silicone oil. So this one right here, because this part is moving, and if you have a very thick oil, you know, it slows the acceleration process down. You want to avoid that because you don't want to lose FPS. So what we're gonna do is we take out the spring, we take out the spring guide by pulling the cylinder back. Make sure that you don't lose the glide ring. Okay, there we go. And before we loop those parts, we want to clean them first. So you can use one of your already, you know, slightly dirty tissues right here. You know, stuff gets pretty messy in an Airsoft Sniper if you don't clean it once in a while. Okay, so we clean those parts, clean all of this. You can also clean the spring a little bit. Okay, so what you want to do is apply the thin silicone oil on the inside of the cylinder. So you just put it on there slightly. Don't overdo it, you know, just a small line. Because if you overloop, all the excessive lube will shoot into your barrel with each shot and you want to avoid it. Then you lube it up there a little bit. You can use your finger or you can use one of those tissues. And then next comes the spring guide. This one is made of, you know, steel base and stainless steel. So this one you don't have to protect from oxidizing the front part, but you still want to lube it up because, you know, there's friction from the spring to the spring guide. Therefore, you want to use again the mech oil. You know, we just apply it again to one of the tissues. And then we put a thin layer of this mech oil onto the stainless steel shaft, but also here on the steel base to stop it from oxidizing. Okay, then we insert it right here. Next is the spring. Also this one we can, you know, just wipe some of the oil onto the spring, just lube it up nicely. Again, just a thin layer, don't just drop the oil in there. You don't want to overlube, you just want to lube it slightly. Okay, so we have some of the mech oil on the spring because it's also made of spring steel. So protection against oxidation, but also to keep the friction low. We put everything in there. Same here for the steel base of the piston. We put some of the oil there. Also on the parts of friction, you know, where the piston here engages. You want to lube that up with mech oil. And then we put the thin silicone oil onto the piston head, you know, onto the rubber head. You just spread it a little. You can spread it with your fingers or with the tissue if you don't want to get oily, but you will get oily anyways in this process. Then we put it back in there. Now for the cylinder head, I recommend you to use the thick silicone oil because it helps with the air seal of the gun. And since these parts don't move during the operation of the gun, you know, it doesn't have to be a thin silicone oil. So you put the thick one here into this O-ring and then you screw everything back together like so. Okay, screw it in there. Make sure that it's screwed in all the way. There you can use needle nose pliers. When you screw in the cylinder head, don't use an Allen key like this, because then you will bend your nozzle. Always use needle nose pliers or use a wrench. Now to spread all the oils, we caulk it one time and we spread the oil by doing this a few times. Because then the piston is gonna spread the silicone inside the cylinder. And then we do the seal test by closing the tip with my finger. And there we go. Seals perfectly the way it should be. So this part is finished for now. What you can do if you're worried that you overlooped everything is you caulk the rifle a few times, which is quite hard because there's an M180 inside. Ah, exactly. Okay, you know, it drops just the way it should be. You know, you can shoot the gun into a clean tissue to see if any oil comes out. Here you see it's clean, no oil on there, which means it's not overlooped, which means that it's not gonna shoot any of the oil into the inner barrel. All right, so this part is finished. Let's head on to the precision part, which is the hop-up chamber and the inner barrel hop-up assembly. Take out the hop-up chamber. Outer barrel, we can't really do anything when it comes to maintenance. Then, you unscrew everything. The reason why we want to access the hop-up chamber is because we want to clean the hop-up rubber, and then we want to put some of the 6 silicone oil on the connection point between hop-up rubber and inner barrel to help with the seal of the gun. And there, of course, you have to be careful that nothing of the silicone oil gets onto the bucking itself, where the BB actually gets the backspin, because if there's oil on there, it's gonna be inconsistent and it's not gonna work the way it should. Okay, take it off. Then we take off the hop-up rubber. We have a look at it. If it's clean, if it's not clean, you can, fill some container with some of the rubbing alcohol. You just drop it in there. You twist it around a few times. I don't have to do it with this one because it's super clean. But, anyways, let me just show you how it's done. You can either just wipe it from the inside out. You put some of the rubbing alcohol on there, and then you pinch it through the rubber, and clean it from the inside out with a screwdriver. Make sure that you don't damage the bucking, of course, or the entire screwdriver should be covered with the tissue so that you don't, damage it in any way. Okay, make sure the bucking is clean, or again, drop the bucking in there, not in there, but in some container. And yeah, then it's nice and clean again. You can do the same for the inner barrel. You can actually dip it inside there and clean the window and everything. And then you can use the 6 silicone oil and you put it right here on the connection point between the hop-up rubber and the inner barrel. Don't put it into the window, don't put it anywhere here, don't put it into the rubber itself, just put it here and nowhere else. Otherwise your gun will shoot super inconsistent. Okay, so you put it on there. And then you can drop it back into your hop-up chamber. So that's it. That's the main usage of all those components. Again, all of this is included in the Norwich maintenance kit. You have the rubbing alcohol, you have the tissues, you have 2 silicone oils, thread lock, and of course the mech oil. Okay, I hope this helped you. Again, this doesn't just apply to the SG24, it applies to pretty much all spring-powered bolt-action sniper rifles, and even to some of, actually most airsoft guns, because they function in a very similar way. There's always some compression zone, there's always a hop-up, there's always an inner barrel. So what I just showed you works on most airsoft guns. Once again, don't overdo maintenance. If you maintain a gun too much, it actually do more harm than it helps. So do it, for the cylinder part, maybe every 5,000 shots, and clean in the barrel after every game. Hop-up bucking, I would clean after, maybe 2,000 to 3,000 shots. If it already were too much, just exchange it. If it's still good, just clean it and drop it back in there.